On February 9th of 2004, 21-year-old UMass Amherst student Maura Murray disappeared in the White Mountains of New Hampshire in one of the most perplexing mysteries of our time.
For years, we have covered Maura's case and the tireless online community that surrounds it in great detail. We have since expanded our mission with this series, raising awareness and shining a light on the stories of other missing persons.
We now sit on the board of directors of the nonprofit organization Private Investigations for the Missing, which was founded by Bruce Maitland. Bruce's daughter, Brianna Maitland, went missing from Montgomery, Vermont on March 19th of 2004, just 6 weeks after and about 80 miles away from where Maura Murray vanished.
Private Investigations for the Missing aims to assist with investigations for underserved families whose missing loved ones have been forgotten by the media or by law enforcement. Through our growing community, we hope to shed a light on these cold cases.
Families and loved ones can reach out to us at investigationsforthemissing.org. This is Missing. Welcome back to Missing. I'm Tim here today with Lance. Lance, how are you today?
I literally couldn't be better, Tim. How are you today?
Same, absolutely. And you know, Lance, our guests today really made our job really easy because we had a great conversation and with two extremely knowledgeable people. And I entered the conversation not knowing very much about these people that we were talking about. I just felt like I got an excellent history lesson that was super interesting as well.
Right. We're talking about the hosts of this podcast titled Vanished, and it is attorney Jennifer Taylor and investigator Chris Williamson. And they don't really look into the stories that we cover typically, missing persons and etc. They are more historical, like you said. We spoke about Amelia Earhart in this interview, as well as Jack the Ripper. And I gotta say, I think I said it in the interview a couple of times, I knew about Amelia Earhart about as much as anyone else does, and had no idea how truly fascinating her disappearance was. And all of the theories, they present 5 of the theories to us. I would have to say that Chris Williamson and Jennifer Taylor are not like obsessed with Amelia Earhart's disappearance, but they are professionally obsessed with her disappearance. They organize it well. They're not all over the place. They're very linear, and they deliver the information in a way where you can consume it, understand it, and really be truly fascinated by it.
Agree with all your points, Lance. Great people, great interview, and great show. So make sure you check it out. There is a link in the show notes, or you can go to vanishedshow.com and listen there. And you can also follow them on Twitter at VanishedPod. And while you're at it, follow us on Twitter at MissingCSM. We're at MissingCSM across all social media platforms. Thanks a lot for listening, everybody.
And be sure to check out all of our fine shows at crawlspace-media.com. And go ahead and follow the new Twitter account at crawlspacemedia for updates on all of those aforementioned fine shows on the Crawlspace Media Network.
We are being joined now by Chris Williamson and Jennifer Taylor of Vanished. What's going on, you two?
Hey, thanks
Thank
for
you
having
having
us.
It's an honor.
Oh my goodness, an honor. Well, it's really the honor is really all on this side of the Zoom screen. I was a little intimidated that Jen was a lawyer when
Oh, there's no need for that.
anytime we talk to someone who's a lawyer or a doctor, I get intimidated, but then I then I come around because I realize that you're human too, and it's good.
She is. Yes, she is. And you're getting her from her office, so it's especially intimidating today.
I know. I can't even form a sentence. Oh no, we're going on a virtual tour.
Uh-oh, very official.
Yeah, I need to add some stuff on my walls. It's boring in here.
No, you got those degrees on your walls. right? Or
Yeah.
Yeah,
certificates?
most important things. Yeah.
Nice.
We only have the fake degrees on our walls.
They're not
Oh.
fake. I really bought those at Staples.
There you go.
Cool.
Well, tell us a little bit about your show. When did you start it? Why do you do it?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. I really, it was sort of a spinoff of Chasing Earhart. I had had that project going on for some time, and I had wanted to do something different for the Amelia Earhart case and sort of approach it in a way that it had never been approached. And so I had this idea for sort of this trial by jury concept, really. And so I started down the road on the show, the first half of season 1, which was all about Earhart, and it was really just taking it from the cradle to the disappearance and everything beyond. And about halfway into the show, into the season 1, I synced up with Jen. I kind of sort of found her in the Astonishing Legends group, and we started talking about sort of offline, off the record about, hey, I have this kind of crazy idea. Is it possible? Is it doable? How would we sort of breathe life into it? And she came on board and sort of advised. I think it was episode 8 of season 1, and everybody really loved the concept and loved her being a part of the show. So she agreed to come on and become a permanent co-host of the rest of season 1. And after season 1 ended, it was such a popular show that people decided they wanted us to branch out and do some more. So we started season 2 and started branching out into some other cases. And here we are about, the midway point through season 2. So it's been a long journey, but it's been a lot of fun.
That's pretty cool. That's I got to admit, until looking into your project, Chasing Earhart, and the podcast, obviously I knew about Amelia Earhart, but I didn't know that much. And I don't know why. What was it about that particular disappearance that struck a chord in you?
It's just been something that I'd always been fascinated with since I was a kid. It goes all the way back to the beginning of my life, really, into early grade school. And I became fascinated with different aspects of her life and the case in general as I started looking into it more, as I grew up a little bit more, got into college and started, the ideas became more complex. I think what was such a fascinating aspect of that case in particular is that, one, she was arguably the most famous person on the planet on the day she disappeared. So, it's think about the most famous person you can imagine in the world right now, and then just vanishing off the face of the earth with no trace at all. And that's really what it was. Here's someone that was, very close friends with the first family, with President FDR, with Eleanor Roosevelt. She was well connected in Hollywood. She was world famous at the time. And I think the second idea that really attracted me to the case so much was that, almost every year around the anniversary or something pops up and it just gives birth to the case all over again. There's some new piece of evidence and some theory that gets, put to the test and put under the microscope. And I thought that was very fascinating as well, because this case, when you get into it, it's broken up into these camps, and everybody sort of got their idea of what they believe happened to Amelia Earhart. And you got some of the smartest people on the planet arguing for those respective camps. And it's just a really interesting case. And, here we are going to go on 83, 84 years after her and Fred Noonan disappeared. And we still really aren't much closer to having any idea to what happened to them than we were the day after they disappeared. So it's a case that's continuously, it's a definition of a rabbit hole. It really is. And it just keeps getting deeper and deeper with fewer and fewer answers. So that's just fascinating to me. It's like the deeper you look, the worse it gets.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about those camps that you described? Like, what are the main pillars of thought on where Amelia could be?
Yeah, Jen, go for it. You were intimately
Sure.
involved in season 1, so go for it.
So there's 5 that we covered in season 1, but there's more than just 5. There's so many different theories about what happened to her, but we focused on 5. The first one that we focused on is commonly referred to as crash and sink. And that is just the theory that she was flying, she ran out of gas, she fell into the ocean, and it's just a matter of time before someone can find the plane. And that the only reason we haven't been able to find the plane is just because the water is so deep and it's a tiny little plane. And that makes a lot of sense. One of the strongest pieces of evidence for that theory are the logs. She was headed towards a ship called the Itasca, and the Itasca was communicating with her moments before she disappeared. And those, we don't have audio, they weren't recorded, it was such a long time ago. We just have the transcript of the logs, but we do have the recollections of some of the people that were there who described the signal as coming in very strong. So they would have called it, what was it, an S5 signal strength, which I learned means very strong, likely within an hour's distance, or however long the distance. It's been a minute since
around 200 miles ish out.
Yeah. And so that is really the strongest piece of evidence for those people that are like, look, she almost made it. She must have ran out of gas. That she must have just missed slightly. Noonan was her navigator. He was a great navigator, but it was also before GPS. And so they must have just made a navigation mistake and fell out of the sky and into the water. So there's that theory. The next one that we covered, I don't remember the order in which we covered things. I'm so sorry, but I know that there is the
Castaway was next.
Okay, that's what I thought, the Maura theory. So there's another theory that says that instead of being close to that ship, she ended up south on a different island. It's not too far away, but it's far enough away that, and we talk about this on the show, where it would have been a stretch for her to be able to make it there with the amount of gas we think that she had, but technically possible. And that theory is based on people claiming that they have seen like plane wreckage floating up on the beach on an island that used to be called Gardner Island, is now called Nicomaroro, and that her and Noonan lived on that island for a time and eventually passed away on the island. That's the theory that was recently given attention by National Geographic. They had who did they send out there? I forget.
Bob Ballard, who actually discovered the Titanic.
Yes. Yeah. They sent him out there to go it's a tiny little island, and he went out there and circled the island looking for evidence. They didn't find anything. However, those that believe that she must have landed there, they still stick to their guns. They say, no, we have there's a very particular piece of aluminum that they found that they've held up to pictures of her plane, and they say, oh no, this is this is a piece of her plane. There were bones that they found that have since disappeared that they claim are the bones of Earhart or Noonan. So that's a whole, and the Tiger organization, TIGHAR, they're the ones promoting that theory. So let's see, we next covered BUCA, I think.
Yes.
That was number 3. Was that next on the list? Okay, so the theory behind this one is that she was on her way, about halfway through this leg of the journey, realized she would not have enough fuel to make it, and made the decision to turn around. And that it was on her way back is when she crashed. And there is a plane. BUCA is an island off of...
It's Matsungan. It's real close to Papua New Guinea.
Okay, New Guinea. See, I was going to say the right thing, but I didn't want to open my mouth and say the wrong thing. So there is actually a plane that they found there. It is highly degraded by coral. And there's even a story that goes along with this. There's I believe a kid who around the time that Earhart disappeared saw a plane crash, saw some people get out and try to radio for help. And then I don't recall what supposedly happened to the actual people, but I mean, clearly they passed away. And so the theory in this camp is that, well, that was Earhart, and it actually is on her path. It didn't, it's much further away than anyone would have expected to look. And the people promoting this theory say, well, that is because she was smart enough to know that the winds were stronger than they expected. They were coming right towards them. They knew they weren't going to make it.
Fuel.
They turned around, they caught a storm. And in the logs, she does make reference to a storm, which was odd because there was not any bad weather near the Itasca. Obviously, the biggest piece of evidence that cuts against this theory is the recollections of those that were hearing her come in on the Itasca that the signal strength was very strong, and this seems to be too far away for that to be true. But there are explanations for that. We've talked to radio people that say, well, skip patterns, like it is possible for radio waves to bounce off the atmosphere, and that it could have been picking up a strong signal strength even though like she was too far away. So it's possible. Did we do Japanese capture next?
No, that's a big one.
No?
Yeah, Japanese capture. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fourth theory that we covered was it's sort of a continuation of crash and sink. Those that believe in this theory believe that she did crash her plane into the water, although they give a different location than where the crash and sink people think it was. But the theory is that they crashed and that they were promptly captured by the Japanese and were taken as prisoner and kept on the island of Saipan for a time and then eventually executed because they were suspected of being spies. Because remember, this was during this time we were
right before World War II.
Right.
Yeah.
So we were not friends with Japan, and there was a lot of military activity going on in the South Pacific, and there were a lot of places that was very dangerous for her to fly through. And so those that promote this theory point to witnesses on Saipan who claim to have seen a woman that matches her description.
Yeah, or interacted even in certain cases.
Or maybe even interacted with her. Right. And there's a lot to this theory. That was just like the bare bones of it. History Channel did cover this theory. This was the famous dock photo where a photo came out and it supposedly showed her and Noonan sitting on the dock there. And then the final theory that we covered is really just an extension of the Japanese capture theory. And that theory says that, well, instead of being executed in Japan, the US government actually helped her come back to the United States, and that she lived the rest of her life under an assumed name, that name being Irene Bolam. There's a woman, a real woman named Irene Bolam that a lot of people believe was actually Earhart. That one, I think, for me, is a little bit more into the conspiracy theory side of things. So we kind of started with most normal, boring theory you could give and ended up in she was repatriated in the United States and the whole government was in on this conspiracy to help get her home.
Yeah, it's very it's very like all over the spectrum as far as the theories and stuff. Yeah. And that's just the beginning. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible. I feel like I just got a 13-minute like history lesson. It like in this nice little neat capsule. That's so cool. I didn't know about this. I didn't know about all these things. I didn't know about how many theories there were, and I didn't realize that there was so much, I guess, intrigue as far as where the country was at, specifically with other countries like Japan. Like, how did that factor? Didn't cross my mind with Amelia Earhart. That's pretty cool. With that Japanese theory, was there any mention that she was perhaps used as collateral? Because you said she knew the first family. Was there any mention like that? Because I feel like if they had captured her and she's told her who they were, her and Noonan were, that they might have used that as some sort of like, I don't know, bargaining chip or something.
There's speculation all over the map there, and that's kind of one of the difficult aspects of the case is that you have basically it's almost like a choose your own adventure because we don't really know. It's such a mystery after what happened after what Jen referred to as sort of the last radio messages. We don't really know what happened. So there is speculation. Some people in the Japanese capture camp believe that when the Japanese did come into contact with Earhart and Noonan, they absolutely knew who they were. Right off the bat, they knew who they had, and they knew the value of who they had. And there's other people that would argue that, they were such an indigenous people at the time, or the particular people that came into contact with her that actually grabbed them would have had no idea who she was in that part of the world, unless they physically identified themselves as Earhart and Noonan. And if they were in fact spying, which is again another small branch of Japanese capture, if they were knowingly in on the plan and were spying for the U.S. government.
Oh yeah, I didn't even get into that. There's a whole theory that they were sit there by the government and that the flight around the world was a cover. Yeah. So if that was the case, then they probably wouldn't have come right out and said, who they were right off the bat. So yeah, I mean, it's very possible. There is
we do know that there's a very famous woman, flyer in her own right. Her name is Jackie Cochran, who she actually founded the WASP, the Women Air Force Service Pilots, and was a really good, close friend of Amelia Earhart. They flew together a lot. They kind of stood for the same causes. Jackie Cochran was sent over years later. I want to say it was about 5 years after 1937. To do some reconnaissance in Japan, in the Saipan area, and to over some kind of a cover that she was going to make some kind of report, create some report, and send it back to the U.S. government. And she came and went and never filed that report. And a lot of people that believe in the Irene Bolam theory or believe in the spy theory in some portion believe that Jackie Cochran was actually sent over to get her friend, to smuggle Earhart out of Japanese custody and back to the U.S. and repatriation. So, yeah, she, we don't know if that's the case. There was a really juicy tidbit dropped by Lisa Cotham, who was the secretary of the 99s, who was as an organization that Amelia Earhart was the first president of, women pilots. And Lisa mentioned that during season 1, and we did a little research into that. And unfortunately, there's not much known other than that. So the answer to that question is we just don't know, if they knew who they had, and if they eventually found out who they had and then decided to keep them longer, potentially, as Jen alluded to, that they were maybe executed years later and kept in Japanese custody for some time. Part of that whole Japanese capture deal is that Earhart might not have been executed. She might have actually died of dysentery. She had notoriously terrible issues with sinus problems, and she actually had a surgery performed sort of on the low early in her career that was supposed to correct that issue that she had. And so it's very possible that she could have died, alone in a jail cell in Saipan, which the jail cell is still standing. It's still there. And there was marks on the wall, and people are speculating that those marks might have been from Earhart herself. Maybe, we don't know. This case is, like I alluded to, we don't know what we don't know. It really is sort of the ultimate rabbit hole, and finding out what happened to them, finding that airplane, potentially would truly be the holy grail if it was found today. So it's a pretty big deal. She's arguably the most famous disappearance of all time.
Okay, yeah. if you are you got a chip to play on roulette here. Mm-hmm. Where's your chip going? What theory?
Jen?
Oh, why do I gotta go first?
Ladies first.
I like the BUCA theory a lot, for a lot of reasons. But I also acknowledge that it has certain problems that take a lot of coincidental things lining up just right for it to explain those problems. And so while I like that theory a lot, I still have to go back to crash and sink. I tend to think that the most likely scenario is what everyone thought happened at the very beginning, which was that she crashed in the ocean. There was a search party. They couldn't find her. A little plane, 10,000 feet of water. It's not
18,000 feet of water.
18,000 feet of water.
Yeah.
It's not hard to see why they wouldn't have been able to find her. And it's also not hard to see why, when somebody like that disappears and it's been years and years and years and we still don't have an answer and we still don't have a plane and no one can get closure, it's really easy to see how people can come up with these other stories, because she was a hero. She was very well known, and heroes don't tend to die in tragic, meaningless accidents, right? Mm-hmm. We want to tell a story. And so I can totally understand how that could have happened. I tend to lean towards crash and sink, although I do think that there is a lot to the BUCA theory. I feel like I'm really interested to watch that one to see what mm-hmm. evidence comes of that.
Yeah, I would agree with Jen. I think, the crash and sink, she made some really excellent arguments in season 1 when she started talking to, and some of the witnesses that she brought to the table in season 1, like just really excellent stuff. Crash and sink, you made a reference to which I really love, and I always quote it now, is like the Itasca logs would be considered sort of like the final text messages in a modern day like murder trial or something like that. We would look at that as like, these are the last known communication that Earhart gave. I tend to skew a little more controversial because I love to look at everything on the table. I think it's really, and because we don't have any concrete evidence, other than just kind of, lots of circumstantial evidence to support multiple theories. I think crash and sink is very likely. It came out of her own mouth. They were dropping to 1,000 feet. There's multiple reasons why they would do that. As an aviator, if you were going to drop a plane to 1,000 feet above water, you're probably doing that because you want to put the plane on the water as soft as possible. There were people that built that plane that we talked to, like descendants of those people. We have official records that are saying that plane, if it hit water in the right way, would have been like a ping pong ball with wings. It would have floated ultimately if anything didn't get punctured. This particular plane, we don't know how it hit the water, so she might have been trying to put the plane down as soft as possible so they could float as long as possible, so they had hope of getting rescue. But you're looking, like Jen said, you're looking in an area that's roughly 18,000 feet for a 39.5-foot airplane. That's, basically in an area that's the size of Texas in either direction. So it's very difficult to find that plane. It's large. It's really the smallest needle in the largest haystack in the world. But I agree again with Jen about BUCA. BUCA is very promising. Here's a guy, Bill Snavely, who's been researching this for a long time. He's actually got a plane. Nobody's ever found a plane. He started his theory with the plane and sort of worked backwards, which I think is really fascinating. It's like finding a body and having no idea how that body got there and trying to work backwards to figure out and tell that story. That's basically what Bill Snavely's been doing. And so I think, there's a lot of positive aspects going for that theory as far as the story, making it work, making it fit, because sometimes that's what you have to do to kind of describe what happened. And then they've got a lot of characteristics in that plane. They've ruled out a lot of they've ruled out military aircraft. They've ruled out Japanese Zeros, planes that were really similar to her plane. The wings, the length, the wingspan. There's multiple characteristics, over a dozen, that match that plane, but it's engulfed in probably the most volatile underwater environment on the face of the earth, in the middle of a community that's having a civil war at the moment right now. So it's a very difficult place to go, but it's only 150 feet of water. So it's not very difficult to, once you get there, to explore it and to actually get down to it. But they have Project Blue Angel and their team, they have a very difficult task ahead of them. And right now they're trying to find out whose plane that is. I love the BUCA theory. I think it's promising. I think we need to find out whose plane that was and bring closure to whoever was piloting that plane, whether it was Earhart or not. It's either the holy grail of aviation, or you're going to find out a really great story one way or another. So I think Crash and Sink is very promising. I think BUCA is very promising. Japanese capture, to me, it's like they're all promising in their own right. They all have really interesting evidence to back them, and it's one of those things where you can basically be bought and sold by any theory if you look at it by itself. So it's a very difficult case, when it comes to just looking at it as a whole.
Yeah, well, and with BUCA, there's a ticking clock, right? Because the aluminum is degrading. And when I say it's covered in coral, it is covered in coral. If you see pictures, you have to know what you're looking for. It doesn't really even look like a plane anymore.
Right.
Some of the earlier pictures do. You can kind of make out the shape, but like looking at it, the coral is all over it. They were able to take measurements and things, and it is a plane. Like, no one disputes that it is a plane. It's just really difficult to see with the pictures that we have available. But it is, it's not in good environment, like you said. The aluminum is. There's no way, for example, to get a serial number off the plane at this point.
You're not going to just pull that plane out of the water. It's just an impossibility at this point. And you don't want to do damage to the underwater, the nautical environment there, and it's a very tricky situation for I don't envy Bill and his team for what they have to attempt to do here. And they've gone out a couple times, but they've got limited equipment, so they're trying to get more funding for more equipment, bigger crew, more operational structure to get out there and to try to find out what's going on once and for all. So we'll see. Stay tuned. I mean, something could break at any time, and we just, it typically always does around the 2nd of July. Something happens, so we'll know hopefully soon.
You mentioned descendants. Have you had any communication with any descendants of her?
I talked to, I would say fairly regularly. Every once in a while, I talked to Amy Klepner, who was her niece, who was Amelia Earhart's niece. Amelia Earhart had a daughter. A sister, Muriel.
Didn't have any kids.
Depending on who you believe. That's a real woo-woo thing. But yes, we do talk to Amy Klepner. She's been very helpful, and her son Bram Klepner, that the whole Klepner side of the family has been very helpful. And she remembers, very little about Aunt Amelia. She remembers her mother Muriel, obviously was a very big influence in Amelia's life. They were very close. And so I do talk with Amy every once in a while. Do check in with her. Very sweet lady. Always willing to help. If it makes sense, is always willing. She's always willing to kind of lend a hand and do what she can, whether it's, hey, one theory needs you to give a DNA sample because they might have a DNA match potentially, or they're testing something or whatever. She's always very willing to do it. So yeah, we talked to them, and we talked to. I'm very close friends with the Putnam family, the grandchildren of George Palmer Putnam, who was Earhart's husband. So yeah, I talked to a pretty good amount of the family every once in a while, depending on what we're working on at a particular moment.
And you're working on a book about the case as well?
Yeah, we just announced that we're partnering with Beyond the Fray, and they are going to be publishing a book. It's essentially just the book itself is a written transcript of season 1. A lot of people have asked me if we'd ever have a sort of season 1 in written form. A lot of our audience likes to consume something that way, as opposed to the podcast. And so we decided to sort of pull the trigger on it and work on the book. Jen's going to write the foreword for it. I'm transcribing the episodes right now. We're going to be cutting it down because I think if season 1 is so long, some of the episodes are 4+ hours. Nick and Maura was 8+ hours alone. So that translates into, lots of pages. So rather than have a 3,000 page book, we're going to kind of trim it down to have a reflection. And we're going to have some retrospective from myself and some of the guests that appeared during season 1. And it's going to read like a sort of like an Earhart encyclopedia when it comes to the disappearance, and the first half of it's going to be leading up to the disappearance. So we'll have a lot being covered in that book. So that's going to be hopefully out sometime next year. I've got to get it to them by end of calendar year. So we're working on it right now as we speak.
That's fantastic. Good luck with that.
Yeah, congratulations.
I think
Cool.
Tim probably just pre-ordered it. He loves pre-ordering books. He'll pre-order a book 5 years in advance if it's available to him.
It might take me that long at this rate.
What does this do, like, historically? What is, if the holy grail of disappearances, the plane, any evidence of Amelia Earhart, what benefit is this historically?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. Well, when it comes to aviation, it would be a big deal. Anytime any piece of evidence is found in this case, it literally sets the world on fire when it comes to news. Like when the BUCA plane was found, or when they announced that it was seen by 500 million people all over the world. When the Jaluit doc photo came out, and the Lost Evidence documentary that Jen alluded to earlier came out in 2017, that was a huge deal. You couldn't go anywhere. CNN, anything you can think of, Fox News, it was everywhere. If this thing was actually found and we had definite, finite explanation of what happened to Earhart and Noonan, regardless of what it was, I think it would be a historical. It would be certainly for the U.S. probably the biggest historical find ever. Maybe worldwide, it would be one of the biggest historical finds ever. Especially if they were able to pull the plane out of the water in some way, like if it was found in the ocean somewhere, or if Snavely's right and it's on BUCA and they were to pull a chunk of it out or something like that. It would be a really big deal. I mean, there's, Amelia Earhart is she's an icon. She's still America's sweetheart. If you look at the newsreel footage you can find on YouTube, if you look at all that stuff and you listen to her talk and listen to her speak, I mean, she was just a worldwide celebrity. And I kind of relate her a lot to really to sort of like how Marilyn Monroe was in a way. Is she was like multifaceted, so she could like turn on for the camera real easy. And she could sort of be Amelia Earhart for the camera that everybody wanted. And then she had a real private side, obviously, with her husband. And she was a very fierce, advocate for women's rights. I think you see that now. There's an Amelia Earhart Day at NASA. There's a reason for that. Aerospace and aviation. She's influenced a lot of people in STEM and a lot of the people that we talk to. So, if there was answers, it would be of extreme historical significance if we had some kind of definite answer as to what happened, to Amelia Earhart and to Fred Noonan, who was her navigator and was one of the best navigators probably of all time and one of the pioneers of navigation with Pan Am and stuff. So people a lot of times forget there were 2 people on that plane. And Noonan was a brave guy to go on that plane with her, and she put all her faith in him, and didn't quite work out in the end, but he was a big loss too. And I think if it was determined what happened to him, we would find that there would probably be a National Fred Noonan Day when it comes to aviation, and there would be certainly something for Earhart for sure if that happened. And to piggyback off that a little bit, not to run on too much, but like if Japanese capture ended up being, let's say, what happened to them, and that was definitely determined. I've argued that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan should be considered the first casualties of World War II, because this would have happened years before Pearl Harbor hit. They were actually, would have been considered American heroes if they would have died in Japanese custody and had all that prolonged capture, and went through God knows what they went through. So this has the potential to break historically in multiple different ways. It just depends on who's right here, and that's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, a lot of the people that we've talked to that believe the Japanese capture thing, I don't really believe it. I don't think that that's what happened, but I will be the first to admit there is evidence for it. So I understand why people think that. But there are people that are very, very invested in that story, in that theory. And if you talk to those people, they feel very, very passionately that Fred Noonan and Amelia Earhart deserve to be recognized as American heroes because of what they went through and because of the possibility that they may have assisted the government. And they're very, they take offense to the fact that they're just seen as, oh, they've disappeared. And they think that the government is refusing, like the government knows what happened and they're refusing to acknowledge like a sacrifice, in service to our country. And so for those people, if that turns out to be the case, it could very well add to what we understand about World War II and what we understand about them as people and the role of the government. And so again, I think it's a long shot that is what actually happened, but you never know. And it's also good to know that isn't what happened if we can find that out.
Right. Yes. We've always been, my process is always as sort of like an outsider kind of, in a way. I mean, I work with everybody happily, because I think they're certainly much smarter than I, and they are doing this work for all these different theories. My position, though, has become, over the course of the last 15 years or so, my position has become, let's not try to prove a single theory. Let's try to eliminate theories, because that's the only way you can do this now. Everybody's sort of standing in the corner, pointing fingers at each other, saying, you have it wrong, I have it right. That hasn't worked. So what we're trying to do now is move forward this possibility of like, look, let's put every theory under a microscope and let's either exclude or include it depending on what the evidence is, and let's follow it all the way to the end. We have that tagline on our show: follow the evidence wherever it leads. I don't care where this takes me, and I don't care how out there it seems. Let's at least go down that path and then exclude it. And then you can wipe one theory off the list. And I think that's kind of, you have to whittle it down until there's, you got one or two theories that are really serious competitors for what potentially happened. And I think we're starting that with BUCA. And I think, one thing about those folks over there, and Bill Snavely in particular, it's a really refreshing, attitude that he's got. He says, hey, if I'm wrong, we very well could be wrong, and I'm the first one to admit it. If we are wrong, I'm the first person to say that. He just wants to know what happened, and he wants to know who's in this airplane and what this plane is. I think if you can eliminate BUCA, that's a big elimination, that you knock that off. And I think if you can eliminate Castaway, they've been out there for 40 years. They've painted that island white, basically, with everything they can think of. They've added some circumstantial evidence, but I think we talked about this in our very own show in season 1. I feel like we could probably eliminate that theory.
I agree.
Of course, there's people that would disagree heartily with that, but I feel like if there was something there, and even sending out Bob Ballard and the crew that found the Titanic, and Ballard going on a tour saying, I know where it's not. It's definitely not there. If it was there, we would have found it. They've painted that island, everything around that island, and they just have not found anything. So I think that's probably safe to eliminate that theory. So you're starting to cut some theories out, and it's starting to make it a little bit easier to sort of focus your attention and sort of drill down on certain other theories. Japanese capture is going to be a very difficult one to eliminate because of the eyewitness testimony and all that stuff. But I mean, it goes back so far. There's so much you have to go through to try to either exclude or include it. And Crash and Sink, it's some of the best people in the world have been out in that ocean, those parts of the ocean, looking for that plane, and everybody struck out. But you got those Itasca logs. You've got the testimony of the people that were there, that Leo Bellarts, that Jen alluded to earlier, who was the last person that was speaking with Earhart, who we had him on our show through a very special way. We did it with archival audio footage and everything. I actually had him take the stand in a modern day trial, which was really kind of neat. And he said his specific words were, "I stepped out onto the deck expecting to see or hear her on the horizon. And I saw nothing. I heard nothing, but it was constant S5s all the way through. We were getting it. So she was right there." And Leo Bellarts himself said that, he'll never forget her, basically her screaming. This was a woman who was fearless, but at that last moment knew that this was it. And he said he never forgot that. And it's haunting to hear him say that. So it's a case that's just got multiple rabbit holes, and it's very difficult to sort of take anything apart and concretely say, no, this did not happen, because it's, you kind of have to bring it back into the mix. But that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to eliminate theories. That's the only way to do it.
You've done some other cases. You've done some Jack the Ripper. You've done some John Wilkes Booth. Can you tell us a little bit about these?
Jack the Ripper, we opened with Jack the Ripper season 2. That one, has a lot, more theories, if you can imagine, than the Amelia Earhart story.
More suspects.
There are so many suspects. So for anyone that doesn't know that story, in 1888, there was a serial killer prowling the streets of Whitechapel, London, which was one of the poorer districts there. There was a lot of workhouses, a lot of poverty and disease in that area of the city. And in 1888, 5 women were found murdered and eviscerated out on the streets, with the exception of one who was actually found in her home. And they never caught the guy who did it. Now, I say 5. We can't even agree on 5. As with any serial killer, especially one that isn't caught, you can never be certain how many victims. But the generally accepted view is that those 5 were victims of Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, the canonical 5, right?
Right. Yeah.
They call them a canonical 5. Yeah,
the little nickname that they give. And at the time, Met Police in London had 3 suspects that they later issued. Like a memo was released, and so we kind of know who they think it was. But they also arrested hundreds of people, and they questioned hundreds of people, and they didn't make any actual arrests. So the case was never solved. And there are as many suspects as you can think. Like, everyone that's looked at this case has their own suspect, from the ones that sound fairly reasonable to the ones that say, well, it was, a member of the royal family, or it was
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis, that's my favorite one.
Yeah.
So they also range from the fairly normal to the fairly bizarre. And so that's what we did. We covered the case, we covered the facts of the case, and we did just like we did with Earhart. And this was kind of our first time trying to branch out into a new topic and really take some of the things that everyone liked about the way we presented the Earhart case and use them for the Jack the Ripper case. And in doing that, we kind of built our whole, and it was only like 4 or 5 episodes. We didn't go nearly as in depth as we did with Earhart, but we really built the whole story around a particular theory. And what I mean by that is that we did investigate all of them. We did talk to, we talked to some other podcasters. We teamed up with the Graveyard Tales podcast to try to go through all of the different theories, go through all of the different suspects. But then we kind of saved our favorite for last so that we could do a trial. And that is what we did, is we put Montague John Druitt on trial and named him as Jack the Ripper. And it was really fun. It was actually like, we tried to do like a criminal trial. Like, what would it look like what evidence is against him and things like that. It was fun. I had a lot of fun doing it. It's such a macabre case, such a very dark, it got really dark at times, but that one was an interesting one. And I encourage anyone, I don't want to give too much away, but I really do encourage anyone that's interested in the Jack the Ripper theory to go at least check out the trial by jury episode, because I think that our guests, John and Christine, they did an amazing job of presenting the case against Druitt. And I came away convinced. And I'd never considered Druitt before. I mean, he was one of the original suspects, but he was kind of, most contemporary researchers kind of put him aside as, well, it's really not possible it was him. But they took another look at it and they were like, actually, yeah, there was a very good reason why he was suspected by police, and there's a very good reason why it could have been him.
Yeah, check out Jack the Ripper. It was a real difficult for me. It was very difficult. I remember specifically, Jen tells a story, and I won't go too much into it, but she talks about where she remembers where she was when she first saw like the crime scene photos, like the Mary Jane Kelly crime scene photos. And I had seen those, who was the fifth victim, right? The final victim.
Mary Jane.
And she was actually younger, significantly younger than most. It seemed like Ripper had sort of an MO, like he had a type of women, like an age range or whatever. But this one sort of differentiated. It kind of like it separated itself from the other one. She was only 25, I think, at the time. And this was the only one that he was able to actually lock himself in a room and take his time. And the photos show it. And it's beyond graphic to look at, and I even had no idea that they even had photos at the time like that. And I was able to see those, I think, the night before we recorded part one of that, and it was right around Halloween, and it was just very difficult, very hard to stomach it. This is a guy that, like, it started sort of the modern day serial killer sort of rage, that kind of took place around the world, and we sort of do make some interesting connections and there's some fun speculation. I don't want to say fun in that kind of case, but there's some interesting speculation in there that happens with another set of murders that actually takes place in Austin, which is really fascinating and interesting in and of itself. And it, there's little threads here that some people do connect, and it's just a really crazy case. And there's a lot of, I joke a lot because we went from America's Sweetheart to, like, everybody we're covering in season 2 is pretty much some of the most terrible people that ever lived in history. You have, like, the world's most notorious serial killer. You have, John Wilkes Booth, who you alluded to earlier, who was, basically a very well-known actor at the time, but he was, what he goes down in history for is the most heinous act, and one of some of the most heinous acts in all of U.S. history. And then you've got, Henry Avery, who is a very famous pirate, who was sort of known as the king of the pirates. And he did some very heinous and terrible things, and piracy in and of itself was very graphic if you go beyond the surface of kind of what they did and what they stood for. And then you have DB Cooper, who was like a very, probably the least terrible of them all, but he still committed a very crazy crime, and there were victims involved in that crime. A lot of people sort of skip over that part a lot. People that were captured, or basically that were part of that hijacking that Cooper was in charge of and got away with, apparently. So it's like season 2 is like full of just very bad people, and kind of different crimes that people can do, and sort of what people are capable of. And it's it can be rough in certain parts when you're covering stuff like that. It can be really hard to cover. Like, you guys know, I don't have to preach to that, but it's like, it's very tough to cover certain things and certain topics. And sometimes you struggle to get through it.
Well, I love the historical aspect that you folks have, because it is a way to kind of take the edge off of it, because it doesn't feel so close. But I'm still hung up on C.S. Lewis. We're talking about the writer of Narnia.
The writer of
right?
Narnia was Jack the Ripper. Some people believe that. Yes.
Well, wasn't he? I had to double check this. He wasn't born. He was born in 1889.
It's pretty ridiculous. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
Right. I didn't say it was credible. I just said people out there think that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've read Narnia. I think it could be him.
It's basically a confession.
Right. Narnia was the confession. Well, another one that's really crazy is for a totally different reason, is H.H. Holmes, who had the famous murder castle and everything. And I mean, he definitely had the mindset for it. But I think we talk about that.
I don't think it was him.
Right. We talk about like MOs and stuff, and like, would it, even though it's a terrible person, would that fit his MO? Would he go out in the streets and kill people like that randomly, or like? So we talk a lot about interesting facets like that during Ripper. It gets pretty dark at points, but
Oh, yeah, very cool. Yeah, because I wrote down H.H. Holmes because that is a fascinating theory with Jack the Ripper. Because that would mean that he would have to change location and MO, and not just like a location. He's going to go from Chicago to Boston. He's going from Chicago across the ocean, and now he's a completely different serial killer.
We know about H.H. Holmes's history.
Right.
Like, we know where he was born and where he grew up and where he went to school. And I mean, you can go see his picture is it Michigan where he went to school? You can go to like the med school there and see his picture. Like, it's not him. They're two different people.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely him.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's
So
definitely him.
and that's it's funny. Like we talk about this, and it's like this with the Earhart thing, and it's like this with every other case. Like every time I look at something, it's not that person or it's not this theory, and at the end I'm like, it's this theory. It's for sure this theory. And then you look at the next one or the next suspect is like, oh, it's this guy or it's this theory. It's like it's all part of sort of the interesting aspect of the show. It's just like we try to take like it's a mixture. It's historical mystery. Obviously it's a little pinch of true crime because we dabble into certain cases like Ripper, and then we'll there's some other ones we're tossing around maybe for season 3 that we're going to do some favorites I have. And then there's obviously the legal aspect of it that we bring in, that Jen brings. It's entirely Jen that brings to the table. It's like, so it's a law podcast, it's a history podcast, and it's mystery and a little bit of true crime. So it's like we're dipping into 4 different genres for the show, and it's like this amalgamation that kind of you spit it all out and it's vanished essentially. That's kind of what the show is. So it's a crazy concept, but it works, and I think it's largely due to her ability to sort of bring all the rules of law to the table. What makes sense, what can you do, what do we have to stretch on a little bit, because obviously you can't try different people on Amelia Earhart, but if you were able to do that, how might that look, how might that sound, what arguments might you make, things like that. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, that is amazing. So thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about these cases and about these disappearances and your podcast. I can't wait to dive in. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
for having us.
Again, I just want to bring it back to Amelia Earhart. I, again, knew about her, but what the two of you do breaking down just like every element about her and why it's important. I love the answer that the both of you gave as to why it's important to find the plane and figure it out, because it does have this staple in history right now that would be great to be removed. And you can look at what she was who she was as a person, how she contributed to women's rights, and how she contributed to aviation, and Noonan. No one knows that. I mean, you have to. I mean, some people do, but I would say just on the surface, that's something you have to tell people. There was somebody else with her. Like, all of that needs closure. We can all learn from it, and you guys do such a good job. You really complement each other nicely too.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. We love working together. It's a great pairing, and it's fun, and we hope to do it for a very long time.
Absolutely.
And feel free to send those law degrees over to Tim and I. So
Yeah,
we can,
you got it. I'm a little tired right now. Y'all want to come here and talk to all my clients? Y'all feel free.
Sure.
Sure.